Hello, Western Civ 104. Welcome to week 2. I just want to say that so far, what I'm seeing from the work being turned in, that you are all doing really good and really solid. This class does have more video notes. If you have me in the 107 or the 106, you'll see that. And there's various reasons for that. The bottom line is that I am required to give certain assignments and set up the classes in a way that are going to be a certain amount of time that you will spend, and this fits into some academic standards. So ultimately, what I want you to realize is that I'm not giving you more than required, and that it's an online class, but it's still challenging. College is challenging, and you're going to a university. And so when it comes to the videos, the one thing I want to remind many of you is that when you're doing them last minute, that's going to make things harder for you. Don't forget to look at the course objectives every week, and know sometimes the notes I will or the discussions will be put off till Sunday, but generally they're on Thursdays, right? So just keep that in mind. And what else did I want to say? So okay, and with the papers, I just want to remind you, I just posted in my last announcement that there needs to be dates and times. Like I said, if you will get 0 points if you do not put some sort of indication of the time period we're talking about. Most of you are already doing great with that. And if you've had me in other classes, you know that I need, I didn't have you need to do works cited. You do now. I gave an example of what that should look like, or options in the last announcement as well. So for those of you that had me when I gave advice about Sunday papers, you probably ignored a lot of it because you assumed that you know what you're doing. You do really, but this part is going to change. And it's not going to be difficult to adapt to. You're simply going to give a works cited, and I laid out basically the options you have for that in the last announcement, okay, on the Sunday papers. And okay, so also I just want to address some of the controversial aspects of the beginning parts of this class. One, some of you told me you were offended or bothered by the rap video about the war. I'm hoping what you did at the very least, and most of you did, if you watched it till the end, you realized that the rapper is basically saying, you know, there's been all this terrible war, but don't forget that we're the cradle of civilization, that we're where everything started. And that's mainly what I wanted you to get out of this, and I think that message is powerful. So regardless of whether or not you watch the whole entire video, keep in mind as you watch the news and you see of all the terrible wars and ones that may escalate again and heat up in the future, that this is the cradle of civilization. That's what I want you to remember. Now, this week is probably my most controversial week in terms of a subject matter that's going to bother a good chunk of my students. And it's because I deal with ancient Israel. Now, many of you are quite interested in this history because you have a Jewish or Christian background, and maybe even a Muslim background. And I don't know, some of my Christian friends and Jewish friends are not aware, and students, that Muslims believe in quite a bit that comes from the Bible. Okay, the stories, the prophets, so forth. So there's the book of Joseph in the Quran, which is based on the story that records Joseph in the book of Genesis. There's the book of Mary in the Quran, based after Jesus' mother, Mary. And we have characters like Job in the Quran, and we have characters like King Solomon and David, Jacob. Okay, they're in the Quran. Now, so a Muslim a religious Muslim and a religious Christian and a religious Jewish person would approach the stories that you read from the Old Testament book about Jews to be something that is based more on God's inspiration. Now, the Muslims have a little different way of handling this, which I'm not going to go into details now. You can ask me. If you ask me, if you're curious, I'll explain this in more detail. But for a Christian and a religious Jewish person, many of the more Orthodox and evangelical types in particular see this as literal divine history. And that to question any of the history that's in the Bible is to question the validity of the Bible itself. This isn't approached this way by all traditions of Christianity or branches of Judaism, such as Reform Judaism, just for example. And I do know pastors that go to seminaries that look at the Bible as the history. The stories have divine messages in their mind, but they don't feel that the actual telling of the story needs to be considered literal history in order for it to be divine truth to them. I'm not going to get involved in this theological debate. This is not a theology class. Interesting material to talk about. But what I'm doing is I'm exposing you to the consensus views of secular historians. Secular, if you don't know this word, I want you to understand, we're talking about a non-religious world. We're talking about academic institutions that are not invested in whether something is from God or not, but they're looking at the evidence in the material world to see that if it substantiates the things that are being said in a given text. And they do this with everything. So there's not an agenda to attack the Bible. And in fact, I might mention this in some of my lectures, but many of the critiques of the historical aspects of the Bible came from German Protestant theologians, a century or so back. Okay, so it's not necessarily even the secular historians that actually got this ball rolling. So my name is Joshua. My parents named me after the book of Joshua in the Bible as the belief of a literal history. You will see that the majority of archaeologists don't believe that that book of Joshua in the Bible fits into real history. Okay? I'm not trying to tell you what you have to believe in or think, and I'm not telling you what I believe or think. What I'm trying to expose you to is the way that archaeologists, the methods they used and why they come up to the conclusions that they do. Okay? So your participation in this section and answering the questions that I'm putting out there are not necessarily, like, you're not expected to compromise your faith. You're not asked if you agree or disagree with that conclusion. You need to understand what the whole topic is and what's going on. You feel me? Okay? So please write to me if you have any other questions on that as well. I do work 2 10-hour days, a Monday and Tuesday at my other job. As I've recommended before, text me if you have a question so that at work when I'm on my lunch break or my coffee break, I can at least get back to you. I can text you back right away, or I can make a quick phone call. That's the quickest way. You can write me on Canvas, but I'm just not going to get back to you as quick as a text. So it depends on how quick you want that information. Then I'll be working from home on your classes on Tuesday and Wednesday, and it'll be easier to get a hold of me on those 2 days. So, and I'll be actually finishing up grading a lot of the Sunday papers. So I believe that's it. Oh yeah, and I'm going to throw a clip underneath this announcement of just a trailer on a very current popular opera called Akhenaten, what we just went over. I meant to do that for you last week, by a very famous composer named Philip Glass. And so I just want you to see when modern culture and anything in modern times, it actually connects to the history that we're learning. Okay, so yeah, I just thought I would do that, and I hope you have a great week coming up. We'll be in touch as needed.